What's been going on at OTAs? I've got the first-hand report from Alec Lewis here on the Locked On Vikings podcast.
You are Locked On Vikings, your daily Minnesota Vikings podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Locked On Vikings podcast, where we're always trying to learn something new. It's part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And thank you so much to those of you who make Locked On Vikings your first listen of the day each and every day. My hashtag every day or sound off in the comments or wherever you can sound off. I'd love to hear from you. Thank you so much as well. If you are new here, hello and welcome. My name is Luke. You can find this show wherever you find your favorite podcasts. Just search out Locked On Vikings wherever you listen, as well as YouTube or Amazon Fire and Roku if you just download the Locked On Minnesota Sports app. Today's episode is brought to you by Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off of your first purchase. Terms apply. Today on Locked On Vikings, got a very special guest. We will get into things with him very quickly. It is Alec Lewis of The Athletic, who has been at OTAs and has some observations. We haven't talked a lot about OTAs. We haven't really seen much except for like the curated stuff that the Vikings put out. And there's not ever like a ton to learn because they're in shorts. It's install, right? Like there's not a lot of true competition going on, but we can at least talk about the depth charts and maybe what we can glean of the plan. And I love talking to Alec Lewis because he does have, I think, the natural curiosity that I sort of like gravitate toward. I really like talking to Alec. So without further ado, I guess let's just get into things here with Alec Lewis of The Athletic. All right, everybody, I'm here with Alec Lewis of The Athletic, attender of OTAs. So I'm looking to get some eyeballs on this. Thank you so much for giving me a little bit of time, Alec.
Yeah, of course, Luke. It's good to be here. It's been I'm in Wolves territory right now. Like I'm driving around to Vikings practice or to OTAs, and I'm seeing like a 47-year-old man wearing an Anthony Edwards jersey just walking on the street. It's like, okay, that's where we're at. But
that's where we're at.
Yeah, it's been thanks for having me. It's been fun last couple of weeks to get out there and watch some football stuff. Try to act like I know what I'm seeing when I probably don't. But no, it's been good. Should be fun.
Do you do the thing that like all of the beat guys, do you like check off people? Do you have your little roster list checking off people?
My bosses would probably want me to say yes to that question, but I gotta
okay, be honest. So you do.
Yeah. I mean, of course, I've got it every day. I get there. No, what I usually do.
I don't want to blow up your spot, damn.
Right? Yeah. No, it's okay. What I usually do is I get the roster, I fold it in half, and I put it in my back pocket, and then I look, and then I try to find the people I think are probably on the fence of being there or not. Like I'll look for that number 18 jersey. Usually pops out to me. Guy moves a little different than everybody else on the field. And then I'm looking for others. Like yesterday, I was looking for Christian Darrisaw. I mean, obviously he's now going to be eligible for an extension. I'm looking for some other people, but when I'm seeing Dwight McLaughlin, the undrafted cornerback, it's usually like who is number 47. Guy looks pretty fluid. I'll pull the roster out of my back pocket, look at it, and then put it back. And I usually take notes on my phone. That's kind of how I do it. But my editors want me to say I check off every name every day, but sometimes I don't know if I'm built for the boring grind sometimes.
The tedium. It's I mean, like somebody does it, right? Like there's like 4 people that all do it and they'll all tweet theirs. Like it's fine.
Thomason was all I will say, Chris Thomason when he was here, he was always, so have you seen Henry Bird? And it's like Chris was funny. Like what about Bobby Evans today? We would go back and forth. We would have fun with that. But you got to do something. Like honestly, week 11 on a Friday at the TCO Performance Center. Like what do you got to do? So we got to get ridiculous somehow. So that's what I'd say.
So let's get into some of the depth chart stuff, because I think that's what I'm most interested in with OTAs, since O'Connell has made such a big deal over these couple years of like this is not an evaluative time. Everybody's just learning. Let's all relax and all that. Like, I don't want to go too deep into like, how does everybody look? We'll talk about JJ McCarthy and maybe some other interesting names, but depth chart wise, has there been anything that's like not chalk that has stood out to you?
Not particularly. I mean, I think the place I would start is yesterday. So I'm speaking about Tuesday specifically. I mean, I was just kind of curious what the defense would look like and what the kind of personnel and I mean, what they do is in some of these 7-on-7 periods, I mean, sometimes they're in nickel packages, sometimes big nickel. So you're going to get different stuff. But I thought it was interesting in kind of their base, or I say base, in their regular nickel package. You had a Caleb Evans as an outside cornerback. You had Shaq Griffin as an outside cornerback, and then you had Byron Murphy playing in the slot. And so a Caleb Evans being on the field, part of me wondered, would we see Kyrie Jackson in that role? Is it too early for that? Would Byron Murphy be on the outside and Josh Metellus play in the slot? Like, I don't think nothing is written, set in stone, Sharpie, but to see a Caleb out there, given kind of the way his season fell off, I thought was an interesting one. And I think I'm focused. I will be focused and interested in just how his development looks, because early on in the season last year, and I'd be interested in what you thought. Like, I thought Caleb held his own in some way. And then I did think toward the back half, I mean, from a tackling perspective, I mean, I think about that Packers game, week 17, it was a disaster. But that's probably where I'd start. I mean, they showed some packages where you had Ivan Pace and Blake Cashman out there together. There was a lot of the three safety stuff, obviously, with Harrison Smith, Cam Bynum, and Josh Metellus. Cam Bynum was I think he wasn't like fully participating, kind of just one of his first days probably there. So sometimes you had Theo Jackson in that role, kind of as that fill-in fourth safety, which isn't a surprise if you watch the depth chart last year. So that's the stuff I'd go defensively. I mean, you didn't have Justin there on offense, so the receiving core was usually Jordan Addison, Jalen Naylor, Brandon Powell, Jalen Naylor. Like, this guy in all these activities, it was the same last year at this time. Like, he just popped. Like, he popped yesterday. It was the same last year. The question for him is probably going to be health, and then ultimately just where the depth chart falls. But that's where I'd start. Probably just the Caleb Evans and then those receivers. I don't know how interesting that ultimately is, but that's what I was kind of looking for, just as they aligned in that way.
If I remember last year, Joejuan Williams got reps to ones at OTAs. Like, they just do that with the veterans. So that, yeah, like you said, not written in Sharpie at all. You know, Joejuan Williams was on the roster bubble by the end of the season. Now he's gone because they kind of been replaced one for one, I guess, with Shaq Griffin. And then, so a couple of thoughts at wide receiver. For one, yeah, interesting that it's like Naylor and Powell. They're probably the ones competing most for that wide receiver 3 job with, Trent Sherfield in the mix, I guess, too. And then Justin Jefferson. I haven't talked a lot about Locked On Vikings about him not showing up to OTAs because it's just kind of expected, but we should probably do the due diligence. Is there any concern about Justin Jefferson not being at OTAs?
No, not voluntary OTAs. I mean, you said it. He wasn't there last year. And it's so interesting because I mean, this is just me speculative. I mean, that's my job to have information or whatever, but like, just me speculating. If it were up to Justin, I would be very surprised if he wouldn't really want to be out there with the team on the field. But the reality is, in a contract negotiation, your representation has some pull and some say and some strategic advice. And so I think, while Justin,
which is good advice, you should listen to that advice.
Right. I mean, like, when you're potentially going to make 150 million or more, you should probably make sure you're doing the right steps to ensure that you make that amount of money. Just anyone in their right mind would operate that way. So look, if mandatory minicamp comes June 4th to the 6th, I think it is, and he's not there, I mean, then I think it's like, oh, this is a little departure from the norm. But even still, if that happens, unless I hear something different, which is possible because things change and tenor changes and all that stuff happens. But even still, I will just think that, like, he would want to be out there if his camp wasn't being smart about the way they were operating this thing. So that's what I'd say. I just, if you know this guy, you know he loves ball. And he wants to be out there. If you know the Vikings, you know they want to pay him. Each side has leverage. Each side, it can hold out for reasons that if they're willing to take on risk, then each side has that is their right at this point. So we'll see what happens. But I mean, I would just have a hard time I just wouldn't overreact, is what I would say. It's easy to do. Some people are going to do it. You're going to see the reports because it's a big name and people, and that works, that hits the SEO and all that stuff. Trust me, I get it. But it's fine.
Back with Alec in a bit, but first, today's episode is brought to you by Yahoo Finance. I'm sure you all have something going on financially, whether it's a 401k through your work or something like a mutual fund, even if it's a small one, and whatever you can put into it. It's obviously something that you're going to want to optimize and grow your portfolio. Inflation costs are rising. And also, I mean, the market is just constantly providing opportunities to make a little bit more money. And I'm sure everybody's interested in that. And for more than 25 years, Yahoo Finance has been the brand behind every great investor. Securely link any brokerage account you have for a unified view of your wealth. Everything all in one place so you can really track where you're at and make good decisions. With a community of over 90 million users each month, we can all try to make a little more money together. For comprehensive financial news and analysis, visit the brand behind every great investor, yahoofinance.com. The number one financial destination, yahoofinance.com. That's yahoofinance.com. Staying on the offense, it sounds like Blake Brandel is the unquestioned left guard. There's no rotation. Nobody's competing with him right now. There's no competition anywhere on the starting O-line. It seems like that front five is set. So how long do you think the leash is for somebody like him, or even somebody like Bradbury with Dan Feeney in the building, and you know, they drafted a center in the 7th round and all that? Like, how long do you think the leash is on these guys for this particular period? Certainly crazier things have happened in training camp. We all remember Alex Boone and Nick Easton, but like, is this are we still waiting for another guard to join the fray here, or is it the Blake Brandel show?
I mean, right now, I would say it's Blake Brandel's job at left guard. Now, I would also say contractually, it might be if a free agent is willing to take a certain amount of money and the team's willing to pay it a certain amount of money, then maybe something could happen. Like,
You can just say Reisner. It's fine.
right? You're probably talking like everybody listening knows. But like, the reality is, if the money's not right for Dalton Reisner, the Vikings aren't going to do it. And Dalton Reisner, given the way his situation played out last year, is probably going to want, I mean, to cover for what he probably ended up taking. Will a team be willing to pay that? I think we'll see. Until they bring in someone else, which I wouldn't rule out totally, but I until that point happens, which I don't know if it will, Blake Brandel's the guy. I mean, Wes Phillip, honestly, the staff has believed in Blake Brandel going back to, I mean, really early last year, even before that. I mean, I remember early on when I got here, it was like, there's this guy, Blake Brandel. He's a backup. We think he can be pretty good. We like his size. He can move. He really understands kind of the scheme. The guys in the locker room love him. He's a great guy. Like, I've talked to him, phenomenal guy to talk, to communicate, really gets it. So I would say I would be surprised at this point, unless they bring in someone else, if it's not his job to lose. And then you ask about how long the leash is. I mean, it's just hard to say. They're going to take the quarterback thing, I think slow, and you want to probably be methodical, and offensive line, you always talk about continuity, consistency, that stuff matters until you get punched in the mouth and you need and guys are getting beat, and you got to,
someone sprains their ankle, somebody's getting smoked. Yeah.
Right. Exactly. So what I would say, I mean, if Blake Brandel is ultimately the guy and they break training camp and he's the left guard, I would expect they have enough confidence in him and Garrett Bradbury. But if things go south, I mean, we saw last year, like they're willing to pull the plug, especially if it's not a guy they drafted in the 2nd round that they want to develop, like Ed Ingram, in a draft class that had not produced really anything else.
Yeah, right. So you mentioned something earlier about like the personnel packages and like the fronts that Brian Flores was messing with. This is a question that I got this week on this show, and I kind of figured that we would see some of all 3 of the edges, Grenard, Van Ginkel, and Turner. Have we seen that?
Yeah, so we were only out there on Tuesday. Jonathan Grenard was not there that day. Neither was Patrick Jones. I don't think it was anything crazy. Now if it ends up being, then that's what I haven't asked about
Yeah,
it.
right.
So
Maybe it's
what I
just
was
a tweak, right?
yeah, I mean, yeah, don't do that, please. But no, I think it was, I mean, veteran. Like the other thing I would say is Van Ginkel. He's still rehabbing from a foot injury suffered at the end of last season, so he was in street clothes out there, and that foot injury, it was something we asked about when he first got here, and they're going to take that pretty methodically. So really, the only guy out there we saw at that spot was Dallas Turner of those three. But to that question of like how often will you see those? I mean, I think third down packages, 100% you'll see that. I mean, whether it's early or late. I also think you could even see at times like, I mean, Dallas Turner playing off ball alongside a Blake Cashman alongside an
Actually
Ivan
5
Pace.
yards off the ball, like at
Yeah,
linebacker.
I mean, I'm
Really.
thinking like I remember having a conversation last year with Cam Bynum. We were just talking about like NBA defense and positional versatility and flexibility. And I think that it's really related to how Brian Flores sees this stuff. Like when you're facing an offense that's spread it out, like we need guys with range and who can anticipate. And that, I mean, Blake Cashman, that's kind of his style. That's Dallas Turner. I think though he is 247 pounds or whatever, like he is able to read the field and move from sideline to sideline. So I mean, Brian Flores, like in the interviews after Dallas Turner was drafted, was like smiling wryly in a way that I really hadn't seen. I mean, he's an intense guy, but
Yeah,
I
he
think
is
part
not a
of that is
smiler.
just I think part of that is just the understanding that there's a lot they can do with guys like he and Van Ginkel. Van Ginkel once Van Ginkel's healthy.
So we got to talk about JJ McCarthy a little bit. I know that like you don't have a lot watching him through like warm up throws from, across the field or whatever, but how's the kid looking?
Yeah, I mean, I've been asked a million times, and like the first thing I need to make sure I say is, yeah, first of all, I'm not a quarterback guru. Like I've spent time talking to people about mechanics. I mean, I know you have too, studied a lot. You watch a lot of clinics. You do as much as you can to understand rhythm and timing and all that stuff. So it's a constant learning process for me as a reporter. So what can I do to supplement that? Well, you talk to people inside the building. And then you just watch with your own eyes. Like last year, I went down and spent time doing this story on biomechanics, watched Anthony Richardson throw with some private throwing coaches, Sam Ellinger, a bunch of people. And so it was a good foundation for me of like what to look for, what to see. And the other thing I'll say is I just haven't seen a ton of JJ to really break the internet saying something.
Yeah.
What I mean, I can easily say is the ball just jumps out of his hand. It's easy velocity. I mean, he's not having to work a ton. Do his mechanics sometimes maybe put some stress on his arm? That's possible, and that's probably something that they're going to have to watch. But I mean, it's something Matthew Stafford has had to watch, and I don't know if you know, but he's pretty good. So,
Yeah, right.
what I would say,
There's a lot of those like zippy guys. I mean, Darnold was one of those too.
yeah. And the other thing I'd say is I just watch in some of these. I mean, because you don't see a ton of full field progression with defense flying at full speed, guys tackling the rush coming. So it's really hard to gauge real life simulative quarterback play. I also just watch like the like side time of like who's he talking to on the sideline, what's he like after practice, and it struck me yesterday. Harrison Smith was doing his press conference, and JJ was walking in. And he kind of stayed out to talk to like Lucky Jackson, Jalen Naylor, and they were like patting each other on the helmet, high five. It just felt like they like there was a respect among those guys. It's been pretty quick, and just I thought it was cool to see JJ like wait for them, talk to them. So the charisma, aura stuff, leadership, I don't think that's going to be any problem. And I do think that is tied to character, which is often a lot of the battle in terms of like why guys succeed and why guys don't.
Maybe we can go a little deeper on some of this stuff too, because to my eye, and I've seen maybe 4 passes. It's just like the clips that people have posted. So correct me if I'm wrong here, but to my eye, it does seem like he's slowed a lot of things down, which is what you're doing if you're thinking, which is you'd be thinking if they're changing stuff, which makes a lot of sense, right? And O'Connell has even talked a little bit about like working footwork and stuff like that. So I guess where's like, give me a hot cold there. Does it seem like he's kind of doing some work in progress stuff?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I think so. You know, when you draft a guy number 10, you're not going to be tweaking. It's very unlikely you're going to be tweaking arm slot, like crazy upper body mechanics. But what I think from talking to people is the easiest to work on consistently and adjust is like some of the lower body stuff. It's rotation in the hip,
Mm.
it's footwork stuff. You know, I mean, like a very minor thing. Example is, I believe at Michigan, he in the shotgun, he played with his right foot up. Uh, I believe this is the case. I need to go back and check whether it's left foot or right, whatever.
He
But
was a
they
right foot up. Yeah.
right foot up. But the Vikings, I believe, with the way they do with the way the rhythm and timing the offense is, they require their quarterbacks to be left foot up. So it's some of that like now you got a rep doing that, and it probably you might fall
That'll change a
step,
lot.
which
Yeah,
could
that's gonna
affect
be
somebody.
weird.
Right, which I mean, that's just how it is. And then I just know the staff wanted to bring him in, let him trial and error with like layered and touch passes. I think that's going to be a big thing. And it's fine. Like when you've got that much juice in your arm, you can rip digs over the middle all the time and it'll be
Mhm.
effective. And you could also hum it on, I mean, to the sideline on corner routes and that stuff. But in the NFL, flat defenders have the ability to cover both the corner and the flat. And so you have to be really smart with where your eyes are and with the trajectory of your passes. And so I think that's part of why the Vikings have treated this period like such a development environment. I really, honestly, the more they do that, the more I commend them because it is not easy to take the long term view in anything in the NFL, but especially with a shiny quarterback that everyone wants to be the savior of your franchise. Like thinking about this from a long term investment. I mean, it's a very dumb analogy, but it's like it's like, do you want to invest in the stock market to make money 10 years from now? Are you willing to do that? If so, then your money will probably grow. It takes time to wait, and it's not easy to wait, and whatever. But so I think that's been their approach, and I think it's the right one when you have a guy as young as JJ, and also just have a situation where you have such a good foundation for development.
Today's episode of Locked On Vikings is brought to you by Gametime, a great place to find last-minute tickets. If you are trying to get to Game 2, Wolves against the Mavs, maybe you're trying to get there last minute. If you're looking for a good deal and you're willing to risk it, wait for a last-minute deal at Gametime. You can get up to 60% off buying those tickets if they're just a little too expensive for you and you're looking for a cheaper way. But you can do, of course, more than just basketball games. You can go concerts, comedy, theater. You can even look for tickets to NFL games coming up if you're trying to get to like the home opener versus the San Francisco 49ers. Plus, what I like the most about them is their all-in pricing. You can toggle a setting that shows you exactly what you're going to pay up front at the end of the day. All fees and taxes applied, everything. So you know exactly how much you're going to pay and what you're comfortable with. I love that kind of transparency about them. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off of your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off. Download the Gametime app today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. So you mentioned the right foot up thing. I was just looking back because when they had all the backups in, they were all right foot up quarterbacks, but Kirk played left foot up. And I think that was just kind of on the fly. We're not going to change any of that stuff on the fly, but it's interesting those little details you can kind of notice when you have a sense of what you're looking for.
Yeah, but I mean, there's also stuff like overstriding. So,
Mm.
and I think a lot about baseball because I covered baseball for 3 years.
Mhm.
But it's like hip hinge, and you lose your power, and you can
Yeah.
be inaccurate the more you overstride. So it's not only on the field throwing, but it's probably also within the strength and conditioning kind of sessions, like getting his body to a place where you're restricting the right things to where your mechanics operate efficiently and cleanly on the field. Like this is how far this goes in depth. And to have, I mean, Tyler Williams, I know who's the director of health, who is really into like the forward thinking nature of development and training. I think it's an all hands on deck thing. It's not just what we talk about with Kevin O'Connell, Josh McCown, Grant Udinski. And so that to me has been pretty cool.
Alec, is there anything else, any other spicy observations, anything else that, you haven't been able you haven't seen out there that you think that people should know about?
Um, nothing crazy. I mean, I have my eye on a few people. Kyrie Jackson, I was watching him pretty closely. Um, he dinged up his hand on one play, got back in there after. But I mean, he's really tall. I mean, like I saw watching him just standing next to Mekhi Blackman. It was just like it's two different size dudes. Dwight McLaughlin, this undrafted corner from Arkansas, kind of caught my eye. Moves pretty fluidly. Is really. I mean, he's tall and rangy too. Like not Kyrie Jackson size, but close. So a guy that I would keep an eye on. Gabriel Murphy, the undrafted edge rusher, kind of just, I mean, standing next to Dallas Turner. Like you could tell why this guy had the explosiveness metrics that he had. I mean, I tweeted this, but like every time I watch Theo Jackson at these practices, and even when I watch him in some of the games, like I really like this guy. I don't know what his future is going to be. I don't know if he's ultimately a potential starter. I know the Titans didn't want to lose him when the Vikings scooped him up before last season.
That's right. He was like a kind of they tried to like stash him and
I think that's
the
pretty
Marcus
much
Epps
it.
situation.
Yeah, but other than that, I mean, I don't know. Aaron Jones, I texted a Vikings coach last night because I was just laughing during the practice. Like this guy's, you just watch him. He just moves moves on the field way differently than Alexander Madison did. It just is what it is. That's just my observation. I loved Alex. We sat down, had a lot. I mean, we had some great conversations. Really nice to me from the time I stepped in, but it's just a different feel. I'm excited to see Ty Chandler. So I could probably rattle off for a long time of guys.
That's
looking
all right.
forward. Robert Tonyan. Honestly, there was a seam ball where it was a pretty impressive catch, like spinning catch. I know he had a great workout with the Vikings. And they were like, we can't really let this guy go. Like it was such an impressive workout that they all were like, if TJ misses time, it's another dude. So some interesting stuff. Those are some like sicko names probably in certain
No,
stuff.
that rocks. This is the place for sicko names.
Yeah. But that's kind of that's what I'd say. I mean, I will really be interested once Brian Flores is in training camp, willing to let it ride, like what Sam Darnold and the offense looks just against him, because he does not take it easy on them in training camp, which is always kind of an interesting thing. And then I'll be interested. Like I asked Wes Phillips schematically how different, like what they're doing maybe is from last year. And he says like offenses grow and develop every year, but it felt like kind of the base of what they do is what they do. So whether they're using more short motion stuff, whether they're inserting the way the Rams did in the run game, like all that stuff, I'll be looking forward to watching because I'm a nerd and that's how it goes.
Yeah. That's the like year to year stuff, but they'll still live on the same kind of base concepts.
Yeah.
Sure. Well, Alec, thank you so much. What do you have coming out over there at the Athletic?
Great question, Luke. I've got a mailbag later this week. That's
Excellent.
It's not gonna rile up the masses, but no, I would say I've done a bunch of stuff I did some on Dallas Turner and talked to his dad and a bunch of people at Alabama. Did something like Kyrie Jackson. But there's some stuff kind of pushing forward down the pipe, bigger picture, and looking forward to some player profile stuff that I'll get to do. Maybe spend some time with some current and former players and do some profile stuff. So try to keep it interesting and mix it up and different types of stories, and some that are nerdy and some that are writing scene based. So that's kind of what I do. When I get bored of one topic, I switch to another and do something different. That's how I roll. Whether my editors love me for it or not, who knows? But that's how I roll.
Well, that's their job to deal with it. Alec, thank you so much for your time.
Yeah, thanks, Luke. Appreciate you having me, man.
And thank you one more time to Alec Lewis. Go check him out at The Athletic and everything that he's been doing. It's interesting talking about the wide receiver group in particular. I think that's the one that really piques my interest in terms of just what an interesting position battle will be, right? And I think the wide receiver 3 battle between Brandon Powell, Jalen Naylor, and Trent Sherfield is underwhelming. Those just aren't names that do anything, but we'll see if somebody comes out in camp and like does something kind of has their, I mean, that's what Brandon Powell did last year, right? Like he was maybe going to make the team and he actually kind of showed out in camp. He showed out like every day in camp. He had a really good camp last year. So we'll see if he can repeat that and win another job, continue to ascend up that depth chart. And then I guess the main thing that everybody's still just kind of waiting for is Justin Jefferson. And when that thing is going to get inked, nobody is ever worried about it. Anytime I talk to somebody like Alec or somebody that would have knowledge, and anytime you hear from them and they're just point blank asked, like, is there a concern? They're always like, no. I think that's really comforting if that's the kind of thing that stresses you out. Tomorrow on the show, I don't really know what we're going to do. We'll go back to Everyman. Maybe we'll do a doubleheader Everyman series thing since we didn't do one today. That conversation went a little bit longer than I was planning for it to, which is great, which is fine. Love talking about OTAs a little bit. And maybe we can get Alec back in at some point in training camp since he'll be there as well. I will see you all tomorrow. And as always, Skol.